Hey, good Thursday evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Penovich here at WCNC. Thank you for joining us for Live Weather Impact. It is Thursday, January 29th, 2026. I always like to put the date out there because we want to get you on par for when things are going to happen. We've got another winter storm, and unlike this past weekend, it's a completely different storm. All storms are different. This is going to be completely different as well. The only thing that's the same, it's a winter storm. Last weekend, we had ice, sleet. It was a mess. We had power line issues. We had mixed precipitation. We were debating about how much sleet versus freezing rain. Thank goodness we didn't get crippling ice, but we had almost to that threshold, 0.3 of an inch, and we got an inch of sleet, which many of you are still slipping and sliding on right now because sleet does not melt. It is solid ice, so it takes a long time. This weekend storm, completely different. It's a pure snowstorm. So kind of what most people I think that are snow lovers are rooting for is a pure snow. But even for us, this is a unique storm. It's going to be all snow and powdery snow. So a lot of things, I mean, there's just so many things that are new and different about this storm compared to normal. And one of them, we're going to start with this map, is going to be one of them. Every county in both Carolinas, North and South Carolina, I joked on the air because I get questions about my house here and there. I said, if your address has an NC or SC at the end of it, that you're under a watch or warning right now. That's rare, from the counties in the mountains to the counties to the beach. So Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Wilmington, Ocean Isle, the Outer Banks, they're under winter storm watches. You just don't see that very often. And that'll show you the scope of the system. Now, not everybody's going to get the same impacts because the criteria for a winter storm for us is 3 inches of snow or a mix. For areas in the mountains, it's 4 to 5 inches. For areas south of Columbia to Charleston, it's only an inch. So if you go to the beach, it only takes an inch to get a winter storm warning. So it really depends on your location. But we can see our storm. It's part of this piece of the polar vortex, which is going to stay up in Canada, but a little breaking off of an upper low is going to come down. It's right there, about to cross over Winnipeg, and it's going to head into the arrowhead of Minnesota. And we'll probably start to see what type of energy it has, because it'll start getting sampled by some of the upper air balloons tonight, the weather balloons that get launched in the upper Midwest and even parts of Canada. You can see the air up there is brutally cold. All those aqua kind of bluish shades, that's below 0 Fahrenheit, so super cold air. The one thing that's kind of not on our checklist, we have moisture, don't get me wrong. We don't need a lot of moisture because of the dry snow we're expecting, the snowfall ratios, which we'll talk about again tonight. But there's pockets of dry air which could reduce the total. So while I think everybody is going to get snow, I think it's just a matter of how much. There will be big winners and losers for snowfall, just like we have with scattered showers and storms in the summer. Some people get absolutely soaked. We've got localized flash flooding sometimes in the summer. In other areas, not a drop. Now, I don't think we'll see not a flake, but some areas could have really light snow and other places could get absolutely clobbered because of the banding features we're going to see, which are going to produce 2-3 inches of snow per hour in some cases. So it may not take long for some of the snow to pile up, but boy, is this cold air. You know, we talk about cold air at the ground, but this is cold air all the way to the top of the troposphere, all the way up to the stratosphere, because this is a little chunk of upper air energy that came off the polar vortex, which is actually up in the stratosphere. So this is a really cold patch of air coming down, not at the surface, but aloft. And it's going to create wind. It's going to create cold conditions. And boy, we got to watch this little lobe right there. Going into next, I don't want to talk about that right now, but I don't want to say storm number 3 yet, but the signal and the pattern, that is something to seriously watch. So as far as impacts, let's focus on that first. Snow, high impacts, travel, high impacts. Outages, I don't want to say 0, but it's low because the snow is not going to cause outages. It would be the wind. So think of a windstorm. And so we could see scattered power outages, but they wouldn't be because of the snow. It's not like last weekend the ice was going to cause widespread outages if it accumulated enough. So the timing, I know you're seeing a lot of, the Weather Service put out their watch and they said Friday evening. I think that was kind of designed for the far western part of the state near the mountains. For us, it's after midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning Saturday. So Friday's fine. You can get all your activities done. But all day Saturday, the winds pick up, the hazardous travel. And yeah, I'm going to say blowing and drifting snow. Good luck measuring this. I think it's going to be hard enough to figure out the totals, but I don't think people are going to be able to measure this because it's going to be blowing all over the place, and you're going to have drifts and then bare spots because the wind's blowing it. That makes it incredibly hard to measure. So Futurecast, we'll go hour by hour here. Notice Friday we're okay. I don't think those flurries are going to hit the ground because it's so dry. you'll see closer to like midnight, 2 a.m., we start to see snow develop. And notice the temperatures too. The temperatures are key here. And look how cold it is, upper teens, low 20s. So this snow, while it doesn't look heavy until about right there, it's going to be really fluffy snow that'll pile up quickly. So you only need an hour or two, and you might coat the ground completely. Think of this as like snow squalls, a lot of wind, a lot of blowing snow, 19, 18 degrees. The great thing about this snow, it's easy to clean up. You can use a leaf blower, a broom. You can get it off the roads quickly. The problem is it blows off the roads, but it also blows back onto the roads just as easily. So, it's going to be drifting. Up north, we have snow fences on the side of the road that help keep snow from drifting on the road. It stops it and creates like a break. Have you ever been to the beach and you see those dune fences that help trap the sand to make the dunes? Same premise here, but with snow, it's drifting all over. You can get big piles of it. Through 6 o'clock, we still got some pockets of heavy snow. So you see everybody gets something. By 10 o'clock, it starts to move out, and then you could see the total. So the boom or bust forecast, we love kind of showing our forecast right now is 3 to 6. I kind of went up a hair. I didn't want to. I was like in the 2 to 5, but I talked myself into 3 to 6. But, ironically, I probably could have gone 2 to 6 and been happy. But that kind of shows you the variability of this. But there's a boom potential. Somebody under one of the heavier bands could get 6 to 8. Somebody could bust and get 1 to 2. So just know that that's kind of in the cards. And so when you see the map, just take into account, just like rainfall, there's not a consistent uniform rainfall pattern. There is definitely not for snow. So 3 to 6, a lot of people are going to be closer to that 3, and only an isolated few will be near 6. 6 to 8, and then isolated 10 inches to the east. That could be low for those areas, believe it or not. And so for this reason, the snow meter, this might be the highest I've had it since 2018, I believe, is at a 7, because I'm very confident in snow, and I'm very confident of impacts on our daily lives, which means travel issues, obviously, which we'll get into a ton here in a minute with Tim. But real quickly, I just want to show you the 7-day forecast, because on top of this, sometime Friday night, we drop below freezing, probably 11 o'clock. We're not going to get back above freezing until probably Monday afternoon. So this is going to be a long duration cold snap that could break pipes. So there could be other issues besides snow. Everyone gets caught up in the snow, but trust me, there are plenty impacts to go around. Tim and I will talk about this coming up. We've got an extended show at 7, talking to our fellow chief meteorologist, Tim Pangeas, up in Norfolk. He's going to talk to us about the impacts out there where they could have a blizzard. So we'll talk to him and Tim, but first we'll talk to Tim coming up in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back. Thanks for sticking around here. Obviously, a lot to talk about. Tim and I have been sweating over this forecast for a while, and so Tim, I'm kind of curious. We can kind of talk it out here tonight. And we're going to bring in another Tim, which will make it even more enjoyable because they'll have some crazy impacts possibly out towards the coast. But for us locally, Tim, I mean, we've obviously been talking about this, I feel like, all week. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think I started talking about Sunday, even when the ice storm was going on. We mentioned, hey, we could have another event. And as it gets closer, it's always weird. The ebb and flow, especially in the social media era. Like, you and I are kind of on the same page. We're kind of conservative and like, hey, there's some red flags. But then you see all this social media and even the Weather Service going crazy with totals, and it's like, I won't be honest, you kind of second guess yourself, like, what am I looking at different things than everybody else? But then I kind of pull back and go, you know what? I've done enough of these. I kind of seen this happen before. I'm going to stick to my guns because the stuff that we were worried about last night, Tim, has not really gone away today. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah, and everything blends together. I forget what we were mentioning last evening as concerns, but I think we were already worried about the dry air being a bit of an issue, right? Or kind of starting to.
Hey, I feel like we led on that, Tim, because we talked about it before I saw anybody else. And then all of a sudden, it's like in the last 24 hours, everyone's like, uh-oh, there's these dry slots coming. And it's like, wow, I think we were the leaders, Tim.
Yeah, well, and then after we started talking about it, about every short-range model that exists, started to really freak people out this morning, including me, I have to say. Because, I mean, there was a point earlier today, Brad, where there were a lot of models that almost were giving parts of the Carolinas no snow. Yeah. And they've backed off on that a little bit now. And I don't really buy that you're going to have a no-snow mode per se. But I will tell you, if you're forecasting 8 to 12 inches of snow, you better get at least 2. And that's just kind of my opinion. And I'm not forecasting 8 to 12 inches of snow, but some people are. And so, it's a different world when you have to go shopping at the grocery store after the storm and talk to people about what happened. That's just my opinion about how things work out.
That is so true. I honestly, I like to peel back the curtain for our viewers, and that's the whole point of the show is, kind of the transparency of how we forecast him. And the way we do a snowfall forecasting, I think I'm like you in what you just said there, is when I see a range, I look at all the ways, how could you get to that low number? Is there enough there to get to that low number? Because that's kind of our verification number. And when I find a lot of hard ways to get to that low number, I'm like, we shouldn't be that high because that low number should be like the bare minimum you think you're going to get, like a sure thing. And the high number should be like, hey, here's like, some folks will get this. When I saw like 8 to 12 and some of these, I'm like, I'm struggling to find how so many people get to 8 inches. That seems like a really big stretch. I'm not saying somebody can't get 8, but for that to be your minimum, that's hard for me to buy.
Yeah, well, and you can kind of also do like a pros and cons list if you want to. There are good things about this system, truly. I mean, you have a great track here. You've got impressive upper-level energy that we talked about and probably will again. You also have, like we said, how cold it is and the fact that whatever snow falls, it's going to stack up pretty tall. Yeah. So those are all positives. But on the flip side, the fact that it's so cold means you have a ton of low-level dry air. Yeah. And I was saying this on the news today earlier, and I think our forecast model, and we'll show it here at some point, that you use as well. Yeah. I think on Saturday morning, we're going to have a couple nervous hours, and a lot of people are waking up saying, it's not snowing yet.
Yeah.
Why? What gives? Because it's going to be one of those things where the radar almost fills in like patchwork rather than all at once, because you have to saturate that low-level dry air. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like sweating that out on Saturday for several hours to get to 3 inches, which is kind of what my minimum is right now. Yeah. I really think that it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, and for sure, you're starting to see like those hints, like you said, like a break between two bands kind of over the I-85 corridor, which means it's probably going to take a while. You could. But I think people should be patient, too, because of the upper low overhead, like you said, a lot of this is literally going to be forming on top of us. So we could see the radar blossom, especially if we get this banding features. And I'm seeing a lot of the banding showing up in the short range, like rapid refresh guidance, Tim. It almost looks like not that it's anything exactly the same, but like rain bands in a tropical system where you got these spiral bands of really heavy rain, and then in between there's lesser rain. But man, if you're in one of those bands, those are one of those bands where you could get clobbered with the 8 inches, and somebody in between only gets like 2 or 3.
And there really are going to be winners and losers, and if you don't want to put it that way, whatever your frame of reference.
Some people are like losers and losers
totals next to lower totals. Yeah, so some of the people are not going to be happy if it snows 6 inches, but other people will be ecstatic. And there will certainly be surprises. There's going to be. We know this. But what you said is exactly right. I think that the bands are going to be there. And a lot of times when you have that, you have these areas of enhanced upward motion, and right next to them there might be some downward motion as a result of that. And so, there might be local maximum, local minimum. Bottom line, you can't forecast that 2 days ahead of time. You can barely forecast that 2 hours ahead of time. And so this is going to be a bit of a nowcast in the event. And so we're trying to set a baseline ahead of time for like a reasonable expectation. But those boom totals, could someone get double digits? Who am I to say? With these ratios, all you need to get is 0.7 inches of water, and you're in double digits.
For sure. And there's another little meteorological fly in the ointment. There's these hints on, especially the short range, of what we call a meso-low, like a small, low-level circulation that forms somewhere in South Carolina, which could enhance totals maybe even to the south of me, Tim. I mean, there could be some spots in the upstate where there's a pivot point, right? If you think about something spinning counterclockwise, a band could form, and it could actually just sit in one spot as it's like the pivot point or the axis for the rotation, and they could get dumped on. And so I've seen this before. We've seen this between the Midlands and Charlotte, where an upper low comes over, and there's like I can't remember what year. It was like in November of all times. There was like 4 inches of snow in November between Charlotte and Columbia on I-77. When I first started getting the pictures, I'm like, these aren't real. Where are these coming from? And it was big fat flakes. It just was like a snow squall in the middle of nowhere, and it blanketed everything in like an hour. So something like that with these type of snowfall ratios, Tim, you're right. Somebody even south of us could end up with some crazy total, and we're going to be like, where did that come from?
And this is an all Carolinas thing. It's not just a North Carolina thing. This is most of South Carolina's playing ball with this, and I think you're right. I think there might be a bullseye with that upper low or that meso-low feature out to the west. And then there could be another bullseye, and we'll bring Tim in a little bit. I mean, he knows more about that area than we do. The eastern North Carolina area over closer to the coastal low. That'll be something to watch. But if you're banking on the coastal low to fill in the gaps of our dry air around here, if you didn't cash in earlier on in the storm, you might be a little stressed, and it might not happen. So those are just some modes that could fail a little bit. So keeping expectations in a certain spot here for now today, and then you can up them tomorrow if we get more confident in those features playing in our favor.
Yeah, so let's talk about timing. That's been probably the biggest question I've had today, other than the totals. And I did think it was a bit confusing. The watch came out, and the watch wording had Friday evening commute, and I was like, I don't think it's going to start Friday evening during a commute. And I think the problem was the watch was so big, it was kind of talking about the mountains and areas towards the Tennessee line. So for the Piedmont, Tim, I think we said this yesterday. I think after midnight, 2 a.m., that kind of time frame, probably the first flakes, depending on where we see it and depending where you are. But I really think Friday day and evening are probably going to be fine, don't you think?
I think so. I think in my heart of hearts, I would say it's after midnight for the start time. The first flakes, probably 2, 3 a.m. or something.
Sure.
However, just considering that it's cold outside, I tend to kind of subtract like 4 hours from what I really think to tell people to kind of be where they want to be.
Just to be safe.
So if you're where you want to be by 10 p.m., just to give a little wiggle room, that's probably a good plan. Because it is cold out there, and this is going to stick right away. And sometimes that initial sticking, like we were talking about yesterday, that can be even more slippery than when you have 2 inches of snow on the ground and you have a little bit more traction. So that's when I think it'll start. When do you think it's going to wrap up and kind of end for your area?
I'm thinking like 8 p.m. Saturday, I think, because we have a couple bands that look like they try to hold on. It's going to be like a northwest to southeast movement. So obviously some areas could end quicker, especially if we get some downsloping coming out of the mountains across the foothills, Northwest Piedmont. But from Charlotte to the coast, it might take a little bit longer. There might be some lingering bands there. And so, I think it's a good 12-hour event, maybe more. And because of the efficient snowfall rates and the fluffiness, it might not take long, Tim, to get some pretty good snow in a few spots. That's like, you look at the loop and you're like, oh, it's not going to snow that long. But you're like, yeah, that could really be coming down, though, when it's doing it. And the temperatures, let's talk about the temperatures, how cold it's going to be. The temperature falls during this, obviously, because there's evaporation, or what we call sublimation. But because it's an upper low, when there's precipitation, it's going to bring cold air aloft down to the surface. So this is going to be really, really cold air.
Really cold, and it's very similar to last weekend. In some ways it's similar, in some ways it's different, right? Last weekend we had no snow basically and all ice concerns, but it was also extremely cold, but it affected the whole state. This weekend it affects the whole state. It's extremely cold. And it's all snow, no ice. So it's kind of a little bit of a flip-flop, but there are some similarities. These are serious wind chills, and I'm glad you brought this up. We have, on top of the winter storm watches, which will turn into winter storm warnings, we have these things called extreme cold watches, which sounds unique and different. We used to call them wind chill warnings, basically. And that's going to be a big deal going into Sunday morning and, throughout the storm on Saturday and into Sunday and into Monday even. If you're out and about, trying to clear your driveway, or if you're just out taking the kids to play in the snowfall, you've really got to bundle and make sure you're doing a good job of it, because it's going to be cold out there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the concerns I have is it's one thing to go traveling and being slick out there, but one thing you might have to take into account if you're going to try to travel, which I don't recommend, and I would not recommend anybody traveling Saturday, if you slide off the road, Tim, and get stuck, you're going to be in some cold and brutal conditions. You better have warm gear in that car to wait for a tow truck or help, because you're not going to want to get outside the vehicle because it's going to be dangerously cold to be outside. So maybe throw a blanket or gloves or a jacket in your car if you're going to attempt to go anywhere.
That's such a good point, too. And what do we see with many of our classic Carolina snowstorms or Carolina winter storms? You always see abandoned cars on the side of the roadways in the days to follow. A lot of them. And a lot of times it's during the week when you have commutes being a factor. But good point. That was one of those things, whenever I got my first car, my mom made sure, it's like, you got to have a big old blanket in the back. You've got to have, this little tiny snow shovel, like all these little things living in a winter climate. Those come in handy in these type of situations. An emergency kit is a good idea.
Yeah, I definitely would consider that, because these temperatures, you look at the wind chills, it's been a while since I've seen wind chills across the Piedmont below zero. And some of this is going to happen during the late evening, even daylight hours. It's not like it's in the middle of the night. This is really cold. And so just for everyone out there, I know a lot of kids are going to want to go out and sled, Tim, and have fun. This is not going to be great snowball or snowman making snow, but sledding could be pretty nice. This will be good sledding. If your kids are going out in this, make sure they have good gear. Normally, Carolina kids don't have the best snow gear, and this is the kind of stuff where you're going to have to cover a lot of skin to go out in this stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to be doing the sweatpants and the hoodie.
No.
It's just not going to be enough. I know kids do it. I did it before. You're not supposed to, right? So that's going to be something to consider. And I agree with you. I think it will be good sledding. And there's going to be a fun component to this, because it's been so long since there's been a nice snowfall. But if you're worried about snowmen and snowballs, I think on Sunday, once the sunshine comes out, you should be able to kind of make that work, because that's when you'll start to get a little bit of a softness to the dry snow and maybe a little water content back in there with a little bit of melting going on. But I wonder if some of this might sublimate a little bit too. Were you wondering about how dry the air might be? We could lose a little bit of the snowfall to that, and a lot of it's going to be blowing and drifting around too.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I was just going to mention. We got to talk about the wind. The wind chill's obviously sorry, but the reason the wind chill is so bad is the wind. And when we talk about like the toughness of the totals forecast, Tim, the other thing that struck me today is like, how are people going to measure this snow? Because when it blows around and drifts, measuring accurate snowfall totals is like almost impossible. So unless you're a diligent snowboard measure every hour, every 2 hour kind of person, or melt it down and convert it to snow, this could be really difficult for the layman to go out and measure because it's going to be blowing all over the place.
That's a good point. It's a very unique snowfall setup for the Carolinas. I'm trying to remember an event that fit the bill for all of these things with the dry, powdery snow and the winds. And I don't know if I have one that comes to mind. I'm sure we've had them in the last dozen or so years, but it's definitely been a while. And for us, Brad, here in Greensboro, I'm sure you're on a similar streak. We're on our longest streak ever since 1903 for us without a 4-inch snowfall.
Wow.
And so that's kind of our threshold that we're trying to break this weekend. We're supposed to get those, and we just haven't done it for about 7 years.
Yeah, and that makes me want to look it up now because I know we haven't had a 2 or 3 inch snowfall since 2018, I believe. But I have to look up 4 inch.
Yeah, same storm probably.
Yeah, I think it was the same storm. The one storm that this kind of, and I don't think it's going to be like this much, but like the second year I was here, 2004 in February, we had 2 feet of snow. I'm not forecasting that. But it was an upper low. We had a 700 millibar low. We had 2 waves of snow. We had thunder snow, and it was super windy. And we had a lot of drifting with that one. So that would be the last one I think I could remember that was, of that type. But yeah, it's been a while for us. We went through this snow drought where we had our longest stretch of no snow, and now I'm kind of look back to see our last 4-inch snow, 2014. Yeah, so it was that February storm, 2014. Wow. So yeah,
that was a doozy.
It's been a while. I mean, I joke it, and this has been a crazy 2 weeks, Tim. But I've been here long enough. I remember when it used to do this in the winter. It feels like, hey, this is the way winter's supposed to be, right?
That's true. I tweeted yesterday that this winter is giving me 2014 vibes, and that was my first year here. The first month I was here, I had that Valentine's Day storm that you just talked about. Yes. And then the next month we had a big old ice storm, and it was just one thing after another, and it kind of feels that way right now.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think how warm it was earlier this month. We're not probably going to end up above average this month, but the first 2 weeks of January, people have already forgotten how warm it was. It was crazy warm.
It was every day in the 50s and 60s, and now we can't even sniff our way out of the 30s during the afternoon. So
yeah. All right, well, stick around. We're out of time for this half hour, but coming up, we're going to bring another Tim in, and we're going to talk more about coastal impacts from Norfolk and the Outer Banks. Could we see the B word out there, blizzard? We'll talk about that coming up in 2 minutes. All right, welcome back. We've got more live weather impact as we talk about the weekend storm, and one Tim wasn't enough. We had to bring another Tim on board. So we've got a new Tim on the other side of me. Tim Pandages from Norfolk. Tim, introduce yourself to everybody here and talk a little bit about Norfolk and some of the impacts you're going to see out that way. Because, I know we hinted at this, we kind of joked, but you guys have a whole different set of impacts because of the coastal impacts from a nor'easter and blizzard. I mean, it's a whole bevy of stuff that you guys are going to be dealing with.
Yeah, high impact event looking most likely. Brad, Tim, happy to be here with you tonight. Thanks for having me on. My name is Tim Pandages, Chief Meteorologist here at WVEC in Norfolk, Hampton Roads, Virginia, northeastern North Carolina. And you're exactly right, Brad. We're watching for this piece of energy to hit the coast, become a nor'easter. There's been some indications that this does rapidly deepen or undergo bombogenesis, right, and rapidly bomb out off the coast. Depending on how close it is to our coastline here in northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, we could certainly see some big impacts, not only with the snow that'll be enhanced by the rapidly deepening storm, but also the winds will pick up with a tightening pressure gradient. Northeast winds prolonged here, especially in this area, to drive up our tides. And we've got a full moon on Sunday, so astronomically higher tides. We're expecting major tidal flooding here for the high tide cycle Sunday morning. In regards to snow, I do want to toss something to you guys. I don't know if you guys have been reading the WPC outlooks or discussions, talking about the frontogenesis going on, the deformation bands possibly setting on up. Yeah. Have you looked at that yet?
Yeah, we actually just talked about that, and we're like,
oh yeah, okay.
Tim, it's like brutal because we know somebody's going to get clobbered, but we know other areas probably will get not much of anything. And the hardest part is that deformation zone, as you mentioned, like figuring out where that forms in any winter storm is like the hardest thing. You know someone's going to get clobbered. You just don't know where.
Mm-hmm. And then I heard you mention this as well, that it's going to be one of those setups where in the same county maybe you have drastically different snowfall totals, all depending on where that heavy snow sets up and just dumps in areas that are impacted by the dry air. And that's another big thing for us. I know you guys will be dealing with that too in North Carolina, is the supply of the Arctic air. Not only is it super cold, it's super dry. And that's going to eat away at our northwestern precip shield. And just how far south that extends into our area, it'll probably extend down into your area too, is really going to provide a very tough call for the snowfall totals and a big sharp drop off as well.
I think it's going to be really difficult, Tim, to kind of narrow down those really heavy corridors. And one of the things that we're kind of watching is, around here we've got that. Obviously, the coastal low, like you're going to deal with, we've got this little meso low feature over by Brad's area that, they might provide these local maximum. And then I'm a little worried, like, as you look at Virginia, too, you're pretty close to this dry air source to the north. Like, all of our air is going to be dry. Is that something that's factoring into your forecast a little bit for maybe the northern half of your area, is kind of like pinpointing where the coastal low is going to dump and who might kind of get dry slotted a little bit?
Yeah, it definitely does. And here's a look at our snowfall forecast. I've got it up behind me here. And I don't know if you can tell, but we do have our heaviest snow bands favoring where the possibility of those deformation zones would set up in southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina, and then a huge drop-off to the north and west. And it's kind of a backwards scenario for us here because 9 out of 10 snowstorms here favor a northwestern dump of snow, and it drops off significantly to the southeast. It's just backward this time around. And we're looking at our heaviest totals in spots that usually get robbed during winter storm setup. So I know they're really, really happy about that. But to the northwest and the area that we have for 2 to 4 right now, that could be influenced certainly by how far southeast that dry air does kind of intrude and just how strong that surface high is that's going to be building in from the west.
So, Tim, I got a question for you. I think there's some interesting things that I'm curious if you've kind of brought into the equation here. With this much cold air and a low-pressure system this strong, do you anticipate ocean effect or bay effect snow at all with that onshore flow? And what is it like when you have Arctic air like this and the potential of like a storm surge or coastal flooding? What are the impacts with cold air? We normally associate that with warmer times of the year. How do your local residents deal with cold and coastal flooding at the same time?
Right, so I'll talk about the first question with the bay effect. So we typically do see that, but rarely. We have to get a due north wind with the intrusion of a very, very cold Arctic air mass. And we'll call those bay effect streamers that sometimes set up, and they orient themselves from north to south right across the entirety of the bay. We don't typically see that when we have a northeast wind, which is predominantly what our wind direction will be like for this storm. With the tidal flooding and the significant cold as well, well, we're going to be dealing with some freezing pipes most likely in a lot of areas, and it's just been so cold for so long that it's just getting colder by the day, and we're at like hour 48 now that we haven't gotten above freezing. Oh, wow. In regard to the tidal flooding being in the winter, I mean, this isn't new. Whenever we get a nor'easter, whether it be in the spring when it's warmer or when it's cold in the winter, the effects are usually very similar. We see the tidal impacts coming into the same spots. There's a tidal gauge at Sewell's Point that usually brings a lot of water into the Norfolk area. And then we've got Lynnhaven Inlet that then feeds into central portions of Virginia Beach. And these typically, with the northeast wind, do not fare very well with the flooding potential. And on top of that, as I mentioned, we do have the astronomical component of it with our full moon coming on the 1st. So our high tide cycle Sunday morning is going to be quite interesting. In fact, I believe down to Duck Pier in the Outer Banks, they could be in top 5 territory for the highest tide for this storm that's currently predicted for that area. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. It's certainly a possibility.
It's been such a bad, summer. I remember just, the latter half of this summer, we had Sam Walker from the Outer Banks News over on the show a couple of times just to talk about how often Highway 12 was closed, how many issues. There weren't even these named storms that were bringing the problems, as you know, of course. A lot of times it was just these really rough surf from distant hurricanes or, big swells. These things can be a big issue in the wintertime as well, and I think a lot of our viewers who go to the Outer Banks probably have a lot of interest in that part of the state. I believe there's not really been a formal blizzard warning issued before for Dare County. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe the Morehead City office itself has never issued a blizzard warning.
Wow.
So that's kind of interesting. Yeah.
What do you think the chances of that happening somewhere either in southeast Virginia or eastern North Carolina with this event?
Well, I think we're well on our way to getting to that point. They've already added that kind of verbiage to the Winter Storm Watch messaging. And as you guys have talked about, has nothing to do with the amount of snow we're going to get. It's just about the visibility and the winds. And since we may see wind gusts 50, 60 miles per hour along the coastline, we'll have some pretty good snow bands, and whatever snow's on the ground will be blowing around, reducing visibility. So as long as we check the box of 35-mile-an-hour winds and the reduced visibility for several hours, I think it's pretty likely that we see a blizzard warning go up. Maybe most likely down to Currituck County in the northern portion of the Outer Banks, maybe extending up to Virginia Beach, and maybe even the eastern shore of Virginia as well. I've got a little graphic here talking about the last time we have seen blizzard warnings here locally. For the south side, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and northeast North Carolina, we got to go back to 2018 for our last blizzard warning, and a little sooner in 2022 along the eastern shore of Virginia. But the one in Virginia, or south side, I should say, the 2018 one, I remember that one. It was a big storm. We ended up by getting 10 to 14 inches of snow, and we had sustained winds of about 40 miles an hour for several hours. As it was a similar setup. Well, not exactly similar, but it was a nor'easter that brought that about as well, and that was certainly one for the memories. But we'll see if we do it again.
Yeah, so we had a question here, Tim, and I think it was kind of interesting. And since you've been up there a while, we talked about this before last week's storm. We've had a lot of quiet winters lately in our neck of the woods. Has that been the same up there? And has that lack of having a lot of winter the last 5, 6, 7 years really impacted how people are preparing for this storm?
Yes, I definitely think so. So we went through a pretty significant snow drought that began after a pretty good snowstorm in January of 2022. And then it didn't snow again until last January. So we went 3 years without a significant snowstorm, and people almost become a little bit desensitized to it, right? The winter goes by, another winter goes by with hardly any snow. It doesn't even snow here anymore. They don't really pay attention. And then once you got that snowstorm last year, thankfully it was a pretty minimal impact snowstorm that broke our streak in January. But it got us primed for a big storm that we had last February that we ended up getting one of our top 10 biggest snowfalls ever in Norfolk. So we broke the streak big last winter. And now I think people want more of it. So, last week we had that snowstorm that didn't pan out to be a big snowmaker for us here. We had more of that wintry mix. We were more so concerned with where the warm nose was going to set up, and we had a lot of that sleet, snow, freezing rain, sort of nasty winter storm. Now people are hungry for a good snow. So I think they're a little bit more in tune this go around, and after last winter they want more of it.
It's such a different animal forecasting out by the coast than it is when you're inland. My first job was in Wilmington area, and one of the things they talked about more so than a lot of the big hurricanes they ever got was, remember that big snow? They got like a 15 to 20 inch snow in 1989. And the thing that a lot of people, if you don't forecast weather, study weather at the beaches, you might not understand. It can be really hard to snow there, especially in the south. But being close to the Atlantic, you've got the energy available if you can get everything just right. And so your biggest snows out toward the beaches can actually be bigger all-time snowfalls than even in places like here in Greensboro or over in Charlotte.
And what's funny is that whenever we start talking about snow, it inevitably always gets mentioned. The circus blizzard, what they called it here, circus blizzard of 1980, and that actually happened in March. And the reason why they call it that is because the circus was in town. And I believe, I wasn't around here yet, and I wasn't even born at that point in time, but they had I guess the elephants were walking down one of the main streets in the snow.
Oh, wow.
Because the circus was canceled. Something interesting with that, but it was just coined Circus Blizzard of 1980. So that's always somebody brings up that, is it going to be like that again? But haven't quite seen anything like that anytime soon.
Yeah, if we get elephants walking, we know it's coming to an end around here. That's going to be. That's what I'm like. Guys, I'm going home, man.
Watch out for those elephants. Yeah.
So Tim, tell us a little bit about you showed us the snowfall map. Break down some of the impacts you expect in your area and down into eastern North Carolina, and kind of a timeline of those impacts as we go into the weekend.
Sure. We expect snow to break out here. In fact, I'm going to show you our newest Futurecast run here, because I know you guys use the graph, and you saw the 18Z run here that for us locally was a huge change from what the 12Z earlier day runs showed, which was the dry air winning out, not a lot of snow making it past Williamsburg, nothing getting up to Richmond. And then the 18Z came out, and it's like the graph woke up and chose violence. It literally just showed a massive amount of snow. And this is the latest run of that. We'll start things off at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning. I don't know if you guys can, I'll step away here so you can see it a little bit better. But we got the snow breaking out in northeastern North Carolina. And then at this point in time, you can actually kind of see the deformation bands starting to set up here across northeastern North Carolina. And then they'll start to lift their way north and pretty much overspread our area. And we've got snowfall rates, according to the graph, that will probably be 1.5 inches, 2 inches per hour. And this is going to be when we take out the chunk of our snowfall totals, Saturday evening into Saturday night. That continues, and this most recent run takes the snow all the way up to Richmond, even though lighter amounts, but it's a big difference from the earlier totals there. And just to give you a numerical output on what the graph was showing, let me pull that up here. There we go. But look at this, how drastic that was. And if I even turn it back to to show you the difference from last model run, let me see if I can pull that up. Might take a second, but yeah, it's just a huge difference here. Let's see. We had basically nothing. There we go. That's not going to do it for me. Let's see. Bear with me, technical difficulties here, but here we go.
It's all coming in from the cloud.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
It doesn't have the right contour, but it was showing nothing pretty much, and then up to a couple inches, and it quadrupled. So it's almost like it's not seeing the dry air anymore. So that's very interesting. We'll see if how the 0Z runs come in just a couple hours.
Don't worry, it'll flip-flop 4 more times for you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly exciting to see. I didn't show these numbers on air, but
Well, part of the thing we like about this show is that we can talk about kind of the behind-the-scenes process of the forecasting, and I think it's kind of helpful or at least educational for folks to kind of know what we're looking at behind the scenes. And I'm sure you probably agree. I know Brad probably does too. I almost feel like nowadays I almost have too much data to look at. We have so many different computer models, and they're run so frequently, just every 3 hours, every 6 hours. It's almost an analysis or paralysis by analysis, as they say. As you're trying to look at every one of these pieces and how does this change things? How does that change things? And it can kind of be hard to keep that consistent message. But in this case, I think the main things are we have a big storm. It's going to affect most of the Carolinas up to Virginia too. And there's dry air as a problem, and there's coastal moisture, and there's a high floor and a high ceiling, and just kind of balancing all that together here. That several inches are likely for a big chunk of North Carolina and Virginia this weekend.
Yeah. And what's interesting, too, here, you talked about the amount of data that we have to look at. So we have a comparison graphic here for our different models. We only can fit 3 in here, though. But I want to bring your focus to the NAM, because this kind of really drives home the differences in the models and the distance in which the sharp cutoff happens. So it's got Richmond at 0 inches of snow. Meanwhile, Norfolk coming in at 9 inches and Chesapeake at around a foot. So that distance is around 90 miles. That's a huge drop-off from seeing a few flurries to a pretty significant snowfall here coming our way. And the NAM is definitely honing in on that dry air coming on and just shutting it down as you move northeast or northwest along I-64 headed towards Richmond. So if that plays out like that, I'll be very interested to see how sharp that cutoff is when we start to get those totals coming in after the storm pulls away. And, with the winds, I heard you talk about this, Brad, is that we are going to get such a poor sampling of snow totals because everything is going to be blowing around. Somebody's going to start saying there's going to be 15 inches here, and they're measuring it in a snowdrift, and then the other person here is going to say, I got a dusting. So it's going to be a little bit hard unless you get the verified measurements from some of the airports and the main observation sites. But be interesting to see.
Yeah, so Tim, we talked a lot about this down here, about how crazy dry this snow is for us. We're talking 15, 20 to 1 liquid to snowfall ratios around these parts, and our climatological average is like 8 to 1. Up your way, are you looking at similar kind of really dry, powdery snow with your setup?
Absolutely. It's going to be a very light, fluffy, powdery snow. So that's a good thing. It's not going to be laying on the tree limbs, laying on the power lines, causing any sorts of issues in that regard. It'll blow around quite easily. It'll be moved off of cars easily, shoveled easily. So that's the good news there. And we're just going to have so much air in between those snowflakes, very well insulated as it falls and accumulates very, very fast. And since we've been so cold for so long, we're not going to lose any accumulation to melting at all. Anything that falls is going to immediately start to accumulate. And the only thing we really have to contend with is just how much gets eaten up and how much we see on radar falling as virga and just getting soaked up by that dry air that'll be hunkered down near the surface. But we're definitely looking at snowfall ratios here, anywhere from 12 to 1 to maybe 15 to 1 here, especially farther to the north and west, well above what we normally would see.
We're getting a bunch of questions in from some of our viewers, and a lot of them apply to the Charlotte area or the Greensboro area, but a couple of general ones. Some people are wanting to know how is this storm going to affect the roads, number one, and how does that linger into next week? And then the next question is, well, what do we have to do with this cold air coming in afterwards? How long are we still going to have to be dripping our faucets for a while? Because those are things we've already been doing. And, Brad's area, we're still having the icy roads here. Is it the same where you are, Tim?
Yeah, well, so our area here in southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina, most are snow-free at the time. We still have some icing from this last storm up in the peninsula, Williamsburg, over to Richmond. So they're still dealing with a lot of issues. In fact, most of this week, schools up there have been closed still. We haven't melted anything. I mean, temperatures barely got above freezing, I think, earlier in the week, and we've been cold ever since. But back where we don't have a snowpack in Norfolk and Virginia Beach and down North Carolina, I saw VDOT and NCDOT putting out the brine mixture, pre-treating the roads to try to break down on that bond between the snow and the ice and the road surface. But I believe there is a temperature at which below a certain temperature it just doesn't work anymore. And I mean, we may be near that, I think, for this area. It's probably in the upper teens and lower 20s where that chemical balance just doesn't work anymore, I believe. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure 100% on that, but I've heard that before.
Yeah, my brother's actually in landscaping up in Ohio. I think it's like just straight up salt. I think about 21, it starts to get a little less effective. And in the teens, he usually has to switch to what's called calcium chloride, which is another product. But what's crazy, and I didn't know this till I talked to him yesterday, there's a big salt shortage up in Ohio. Like nobody has salt up there. And I'm kind of curious if that's something going around the rest of the country, because like people are looking for sand and other ways to get to melt the snow and ice. So
yeah,
I was kind of struck. He's like, you can't get salt anywhere. Like there was a big contractor with the state who didn't buy any last summer because they didn't think there was going to be much snow this winter. And so it's one of those trickle down effects. And I'm kind of curious if it's impacting us, because after last weekend's storm, Tim, at least around here in Charlotte, I don't know about you up in Greensboro, Tim B, but you can't get ice melt anywhere. It's like impossible to find right now.
Who would have thought that salt would become a commodity, right?
Right, it's true. Yeah, and now that's really worth its weight in gold, because, we were talking to our local cities up here, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, like, how you doing? And they say, well, we had enough for about 2 storms. And so they used about half of it last weekend, and now they got the rest of it. So I think it's going to be difficult, and they might want to ration it a little bit, because like you guys were saying, there really is a limit to how well it can work in these situations. And snow-packed roads, while they're not great, they're a little bit better than iced-up roads. And I think, there will be some traction to it on Saturday, at least initially, before you can get those plows to take care of it. And maybe just let the plows do the work.
Yeah. And, when we usually get snow here, it's typically gone in a day or two. I mean, we see our temperatures bounce back and everything melts away, and you usually don't even have to plow the roads. And honestly, they don't plow the roads around here, and all the side and intermediate roads, they stay snow covered. They just hit the interstates and the main roads, and they'll stay snow covered. And this go around, we've got an extremely cold couple of days afterwards. So the snow that we do get from this weekend probably won't start to melt until we get to the middle of the week. In fact, we've got ourselves an extreme cold watch up. Wow. And we haven't had that before. So it's very unusual. We've had several cold weather advisories so far this year, but it's the first extreme cold watch, and we're expecting those wind chills as that nor'easter cranks offshore and driving down those northwest winds. Air temperatures in the mid-teens. We'll have wind chills well below zero as we get up Sunday morning. So that snow blowing around, it's not going to be pretty to be outside. It's also almost going to be painful to be outside feeling that cold on your skin.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're dealing with down here. And, one of the interesting things is, we're kind of in 3 different little areas from south to north. We do pretty good with short bouts of cold weather down here from a plumbing standpoint, but as these cold snaps progress and get longer, we tend to have more pipe issues. Have you had a lot up in the Tidewater, Norfolk area at all with pipes, or are you concerned that could become a growing issue after the storm moves out?
In terms of municipalities seeing any burst pipes, haven't seen anything like that at all yet. Haven't heard much in terms of residential areas dealing with that. But what we have seen a lot of, unfortunately, is, with this bout of cold air, we've had a lot of house fires and a lot of fatalities from house fires. So they're definitely becoming more numerous with the cold. People trying to keep warm, running their ovens, their space heaters, things like that, and not using them safely. And unfortunately, this is the result. And, you see this every year, but unfortunately it's happening, and it's going to stay cold for quite a while.
One of our biggest concerns last week, we were really gearing up for a huge amount of ice, and we're super fortunate that we didn't get that. But one of the big problems with that, if it were to happen, was that so many folks would lose power. We ended up seeing this in Nashville. They're dealing with the aftermath of that right now. In North Carolina, I don't think either Brad or we're not really all that worried about power outages around here. But in your area, the winds could crank up a bit more. Is that more of a concern as you get closer to the coast and have those higher gusty winds? Or are things just built for it over there because it's a hurricane zone?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. The infrastructure is built up a little bit more to be more resilient in that type of situation. I think that would be the only driving force to any power outages for this storm, would be some higher wind gusts, especially farther inland where the infrastructure isn't built up for hurricanes as much as it is along the immediate coast. So we could have a few trees coming down and on branches and that sort of deal. But I bet that Dominion would get to it pretty quick and fix the problem. I don't see it being widespread power outages or anything like that this go around, which is certainly some good news.
Yeah, we do not want to lose power with this cold snap. So some of the questions we've been getting, Tim, are about historical storms. Do you think this is going to approach anything that people could remember? I know all storms are different. I'm not a big fan of comparing them because they're always different. But does this storm remind you of any storms in your past up there that it might be reminiscent to some of the viewers out there?
Well, a couple days ago, I don't know if you ever pay attention to like the storm analogs when the model with the surface maps can kind of pull up, past storm instances and things like that. A couple days ago, an analog came up for this storm. Was December 26, 2010. And we call that our almost white Christmas storm. And basically that one was obviously a similar setup. It was an analog, and we got one of our top 10, I think it was our third biggest snowfall event for Norfolk. So when I saw that, I got a little bit excited, and I know that's not too long ago. It's 16 years ago, but I think a lot of people do remember that, and that was a big one.
Yeah.
So that may be something, and that was also one that kind of overperformed a little bit. It was forecast to be a little less snow than it ended up being, so we'll see. Jury's still out on that one.
Yeah, that was a big one here in North Carolina, too. It's actually probably our best white Christmas option. It hit here a little earlier than you guys, obviously, but that's one that people, oddly enough, some people forget about it because they say, I've never had a white Christmas, but we really did.
Yeah.
That was the whole state.
Yeah. I
Brad,
think we were
getting
just barely below like the white Christmas.
So close. Brad, this will make you chuckle here. Someone's asking about, does this weather pattern remind us of the March in 1960 when it snowed every Wednesday? This is our third weekend in a row now. Don't forget that 2 weeks ago where we had some snow showers.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a pattern at this point.
Yeah, that is like the most infamous March. That's our all-time snowiest month in Charlotte is March 1960. And everyone here talks about it still, that it snowed every Wednesday that month. And one of the storms was like 8 inches, one was 10.6. But for the whole month, we had like 20 inches of snow in March. And it still makes that the snowiest single month in Charlotte's history because of that. But yeah, that kind of reminded me of that a little bit because every Saturday and Sunday we've had something. Now, 3 weeks ago, it was kind of nothing for us, a little flurries up your way. But this is the third weekend in a row, and it's weird how this cycle, we get into this trough, and we get storm after storm. So, guys, I hate to cut y'all short, but we're out of time. This was great. We'll probably do it again soon. Be safe out there, everybody. We'll have more news coming up after the break.